hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. I'm your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I am excited to introduce you to Stephan Bajaio. Let me tell you who he is. He is a CEO, a co-founder, and a CMO with 20 years of experience in the SEO and digital marketing space. He's helped brands like FedEx, Comcast, and Siemens win in search. And now he co-founded VibeLogic to help businesses navigate the collision of AI and organic search. Today, he helps marketers stop chasing algorithms and start building strategies that actually last, which I love. So, Stephan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim, and excited to be here and chat with your audience.
Good, good. All right. Before we get into the business, let's get into your business.
Sure.
So your random question is, what is the most out of character thing that you've ever done?
I think a lot of people would probably say that I'm not the biggest risk taker. So this might come across as pretty strange to them. But I once got into a cage in South Africa and came face to face with a great white shark. It actually got its head in my cage. My ex-wife was a little bit closer than me. All good, all good. I promise you, things ended well between us and the shark. So there were no issues in that regard. But I will say it was a surreal experience and something that time kind of shifts and stops when you have an apex predator about a few inches from your face. It's a different thing. And I'm not exactly Mr. Risk Taker, even though I'm an entrepreneur and all the things you might associate with that. So maybe that's a contradiction in terms. But I guess I never proposed to be a risk taker. I'm not the guy who's jumping out of an airplane or doing any wild, crazy, insane stuff. But I figured when in South Africa,
I don't know. Yeah.
well, we were the first group and I wanted to do it again. And my ex was like, we're not doing that ever again. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, what are the odds we're going to have a shark put its head in our cage twice?
So was that, I just can't even imagine. I would think that you do that sort of with the idea that you're in a cage and you're protected. So even if the shark were to try to get in, it couldn't, right?
It gets its front in, so it's not opening its mouth, but it's still, this is not a cage like the cage you would see with a square. It is a long against the boat. We were not under. We were like, hold your breath with a mask and a snorkel. Hold your breath and go down. And they'd say, shock to the left. And you'd go down and watch. You just don't expect one's going to come right at you.
Right.
So it's a slow motion, momentary. It made me realize, because I'd had a love for sharks all my life, it made me realize that there's really no purpose in being that scared, because if one really did want to go get you, it happens in such a split second that you can't even fathom it in your brain. There's no jaws and the fin and the long build up with the music and it's done. It was there and gone. And on video, someone was videotaping it from above. I think it was less than 3 seconds. But if you had asked me right at that moment, I would have said it took at least 3 to 4 minutes.
Right.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. That's a really interesting observation around there's no use panicking, because really whatever's going to happen is going to happen, right?
Yes.
But I don't think I would have that awareness. It's so funny that you say that. You had that with a shark. We had a couple of years ago a mouse infestation, and I don't think I'm ever going to recover from the trauma. Right.
Listen, if it really scares you, I'm never watching Arachnophobia. That's a movie that came out in the 80s, and I'm just not going there. That for me is your mouse thing, right? I'm okay with snakes, but come spiders, I'm out. Done.
Right. So, we've got to know. Here you go. Right. Unconventional wisdom about conventional wisdom. Right. Know yourself. Right.
Yeah. And in all fairness, not to get to pontificate or wax too poetic, but bring this story up once in a while. My great uncle Ellie aged to the ripe old age of 104, but he did it in the best way possible. I wish that upon every single person listening, watching, you and I and everyone we know. We're in hospice and he's asking for cognac. And at a home, he's asking to get books to learn Chinese, even though that would be his 11th or 12th language, because the woman who cleaned in his apartment in New York City, where he lived alone, by the way, still at that age, spoke Chinese and he wanted to speak to her in her native language. This is also someone who went to work until he was 98. Work being at 98, you go downstairs, you get in a cab in New York City, you go to your office, you go upstairs, you shuffle some papers, you talk to your daughter, your grandson who work at the business, you go back down to the cab and you go home. But for a 98-year-old, God bless you, that's amazing. And Uncle Ellie, I once asked him because his apartment was about 6 blocks from where I worked at Conductor, a previous company I co-founded in New York City. And I would like to take lunch breaks when I could to go get some wisdom and also just to see him because I loved him and he's the patriarch of my family. He brought everyone over to the United States. So I would go sit with him and I said, Uncle Ellie, what's the one thing, the one piece of advice you think is the most important in life? And he said, you can only control the way you respond to it. And I've heard that used elsewhere since, but to me, that was like revolutionary in concept because it's so true. You can't control whether the shark's going to get you. You can't control sometimes if you're in the water, for that matter, right? You can only control with how you respond to the situation you're in. You could flail. Oh my God, there might be a shark and make waves and all that stuff. By the way, that attracts sharks, just so you all know. But like you could respond that way. You could try to keep your calm and your breath, right? That's another way of responding to that same situation, right? But again, you can only control how you respond to the external elements that are provided to you.
Stefan, you could be like me and not go down there to begin with. Problem solved.
Wait, I get it. I get it. I get it. But ultimately, that concept is something I try to carry with me as much as I can because I am the person who gets influenced and affected more than I'd like to admit by the situations I'm in. And you want to try to walk away from as many of those having owned them, not having them owned you. And I don't mean the people, I literally mean the situations.
Right. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that really more specifically as we get into the conversation. But I
Sure.
think you're right. You're really, at least to me, you're preaching to the choir. I think that is a mantra that I hold and use with my clients all the time, which is that when you are in a situation and all you can think about, even just think about, listen to this, Stefan, think about how you tell the story of something that happened, right? And sometimes it's the really trivial stuff, right? I went to the supermarket and there was a long line and the cashier was chatty, right? And so it took a really long time, right? It can be very just trivial things. But I think what happens is we often tell those stories as victims, right? This happened to me.
To me, yep.
And it's wasted energy at the end of the day. Because just like your Uncle Ellie said, the only, in the situation, maybe I didn't, that was probably not the best example because I could also choose to leave. I could choose to go into a different line, right? I have a lot of choices there. But there's a lot of bad things that happen to people, right?
Yeah,
That you don't have any choice about, right? But
absolutely.
but you do have a choice about how you process that information, how you talk about it, right? What your experience of it is. And when I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole, but I did read a while ago and I just loved this, which is I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. Which I really, there's something about that really resonates with me. I think there's a lot of power in being a survivor because you own your
Your
experience.
story. Yeah, you own your story. I think it's interesting when you can, and I'd actually be interested in your take on this, Kim, but like I think it's interesting when you think about the concept of not just owning your story, but being able to stop and recognize in the moment, right? So different situations have different issues, right? We have to admit that. Sometimes adrenaline goes. And now you're dealing with something like that. Literally, physical aspects can be happening to you. But a lot of time, I would say less than, unless you're a thrill seeker who's constantly putting themselves in these types of situations with sharks and other things, I would say that's probably not the leading thing that's probably happening in most people's lives. So then the question becomes, how do you stop in the moment, recognize and make the shift of the, I don't want to say the observer, but I think you first have to observe in order to respond and react, right? How many times do people just react in the moment and then the
Absolutely.
whole problem is I just reacted, I should have just, but it's that idea of I can only control honestly how I respond to it. So I have to slow things down in a certain way to decide how I want to respond.
Well, I'd have actually two things to say that. First of all,
Sure.
it's about preparation. You got to have tools in your toolkit,
Yeah.
right? Because stuff is going to come up. Trying to figure it out in the moment when you are triggered and charged is not the right time to do it. You
Interesting.
have to, and the thing is that you have to have more than one thing because it depends on how triggered are you, right? What's going on in the moment as to what your experience of that is going to be, and also to who it is, what is also the circumstance,
Sure.
right?
Of course.
So I think it's really having, I can do this, or I can do this, or I can do this, so that, and you practice so that in the moment, it's not like I have no resources at my disposal and I'm triggered, right?
Isn't that interesting? We don't teach any of that in schools.
That's right.
We don't teach any aspect of, and some might argue this is psychology, but I'd also say it's human nature. And I wonder how much better off, not to wax too poetic on this, we'd be as a society if we could recognize this stuff, right? If you're looking at a situation, someone cuts you off in traffic, you can either respond to that with the finger, anger. I often curse, to be honest, but I also have started recognizing that person might be having a really bad day. That person might actually be trying to get to the hospital to see their parent. There might be a situation I'm completely unaware, or they could just be a schmuck. That's possible too. But you know what? It's all good. This person clearly didn't try to hit my car or do something aggressive on purpose. We project so much and we respond, we allow ourselves so much response. And what I find really interesting thinking about this, humanity has never had so many inputs. It's the
Absolutely.
amount of fatigue of response is something I don't feel like anyone's talking about because decision fatigue alone is constant. I like to say, what color would you like your shovel? You can get it from Amazon in 3 hours to your door. I don't know why I need a pink shovel, but it's available to me, in all fairness. And that's not a knock on your outfit. You're the one who's going to want the pink shovel based on today's outfit.
I am going to want a pink
But
shovel.
I'm just saying, from its utility perspective, I doubt we're going to call for a reason for that shovel to be pink. And I guess what I'm getting at is it's an embarrassment of riches that our society has gotten to this point, but with it comes a tax on the brain that I think, frankly, we're going to happily give to AI and agents and a bunch of other stuff soon because we just don't want to think about it anymore. It's too
Right.
much.
Okay. And then you know what? I'm going to bring this down to a very practical level that I think is just a tip for everybody to use. I would agree with you. And relative to that, we actually need to manage our calendars differently. So, one of the things that I think has become imperative is, aside from all the other tips that I have about managing your calendar around priorities and goal setting and all the other things, you got to really pay attention to not just how much time something's going to take you to do, but also how much brain power and energy is it going to take you to do relative to this decision fatigue, right? And actually, it's funny because in looking at my calendar this week is really top of mind for me because I've been working with my assistant on this. Because for this week, the only times that I have open are late in the afternoon. And honestly, that if I've been in meetings all day,
Brained.
right? I mean, this week in particular, I've started it meeting, not up, meetings
Yeah.
at 6 a.m. starting to try to do brain work at 4 in the afternoon or 5 in the afternoon, it's just, it's not going to happen. Could I respond to some emails? Can I do some lower
Yeah,
brain
yeah,
power
yeah.
tasks? Sure. But can I do anything? Can I work on my business? Can I do anything strategic?
No,
Can
no
I do
critical decisions. When those decisions are made, and there's the whole eat the frog thing concept, if you've never heard of that, the idea that you take on the hardest challenge first. But that, again, I think your point is well taken, Kim. Certain people, this whole concept of we have to follow this process and this methodology of you got to be awake during these hours, you shouldn't. I don't know if that's true. I've heard some really smart people who just happen to be night owls and they're able to get their stuff
That's right.
done at 8, 9, 10,
Right.
11, 12, and though that's perfect. And
Right.
then they sleep a
That's
different
right.
set.
Well,
And
let's talk about school. Who ever thought that doing high school for teenagers starting at 7 or 8 in the morning was a good idea? Right?
they
Like,
weren't a teen, I'll tell you that.
that's right. We do it because it's what works for kids at
No,
all. And
it's a great point. I wonder what it would look like if kids were learning and forget the actual location because the idea of kids going to school at night becomes an issue and stuff. But even with this idea of what's the average teenager doing at 8 p.m., and let's assume it's not summertime, let's assume it's under some form of supervision, they're probably playing video games. They're probably online, right? And if they're online and they were actually learning at that time instead, would their brain be more prone to taking in stuff? They might not be happy about it, but I'm kind of taking
yeah,
what you're saying and I'm wondering if they
I
up until
mean,
10,
that's
11,
right.
which they like, and going for that later portion. You do it in college. People stack their classes that way, and you do allow for that to happen. I wonder if the transition even would be smarter or even less of a off-putting situation if they would be able to do that earlier in their lives. It's a very good point. I never thought of that. I
Yeah.
also don't
All
have a
right.
teenager yet.
Yeah, there you go. I've
Still,
already
she's
raised
still
three.
6. Easy, easy, easy. She just lost her first tooth last night, so we're at tooth fairy stage. This is where we're at. Like it already
Okay.
was like a oh my god, she's getting older moment for me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh boy, I don't know if I like this. So
Yeah, that's so cute. All right, Stefan, let me ask you this. Since we're talking about expectations and life cycles and decisions and all these things, I think this is actually a great transition into the first question that I want to ask you, which is what is a piece of conventional business wisdom that you followed early on, only to realize later that it was completely wrong for you?
I'm still struggling with this one, but I'll put it out there. I think I chase being indispensable. It was a core facet of who I am, what I do, right? Get in, and every single role, for example, at Conductor that I created was a role that I had to create from scratch. We didn't have X, we didn't have a professional services team, so I built one from scratch. At first, it was me, and then it was me plus 2 kids almost straight out of school, and then later it would be 65 people. But in order to get there, at first I was indispensable. And that's normal. If you're building a system, you have to be indispensable to
Right.
it. It's the ego sensibility that you need to be willing to let go of and actually see it if you're a servant leader like I tend to be and try to be. I want to make the others on my team indispensable. I want to make them feel indispensable. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel capable. I want them to feel all of that. So my role is not to be the linchpin of the system. If I've done that, I haven't really built a system. I built myself into some kind of strange carry me in on your shoulders type of nah, that's not me. I like flat works. I like when people can reach their potential. And I really like the idea that if you can let go of your fragile ego for a minute, you should be trying to work yourself out of the center of any system you build. It's okay to build yourself into the center because you do need to do Q&A. You do, as it scales, have to be a part of it. That was the luxury, by the way, of having VC funding, sales reps that would bring me an embarrassment of riches of, oh, you want to talk to GE Healthcare here, you want to talk to Siemens here, you want to talk to Uber here, you want to talk to Shutterstock here, Marriott. Great. I didn't have to go hunting, right? I could farm, I could grow, I could do all that stuff without trying to worry about whether or not the next paycheck was coming through the door. Very different entrepreneurial spirit and aspect than when you have to fight for your own food and try to make sure the system still works. So, yeah, there's a time when you are indispensable to the business, and that's clear. And I definitely am in Vibe Logic, my company today, no question. But do I want to be forever? No. But I've also realized, sorry, we'll tie this one up in a second, Kim. I've also realized that some of the leaders I've respected the most who built the best businesses realized that indispensability didn't mean CEO. So I didn't get into entrepreneurship because I love businessy business. I love business so much. I love the mechanics of it and having to sit here and think of pricing models and think of retention and think of accounts payable and think of no, I don't love any of that. That's not the passion within me. Doesn't live there. The people I've noticed who've done the greatest job in building their companies up and handing them to someone else as a CEO and allowing themselves to be the head strategist or the head allows them the space for their passion, not to leave the business, because that also seems to be a thing. Like, you got to get out of the business then. If you're not going to be the center of the business, then get out of here. No, I actually really believe that if you can have a role that embodies your passion and allows you to be the person you should be to your business and why you started it, more founders should find their way to a strategist and a head of strategy role rather than trying to take this laddered approach to CEO-dom that frankly none of them get real dopamine out of in the first place. But they're not going to tell you that because they're supposed to say, I love being CEO.
And I think I'm a little tongue-tied because, first of all, there's so much there to talk about.
Sure.
But I think I want to take this in a little bit different direction
Well,
because there's something that I hear all the time that I've been pondering and struggling with a little bit. Because on the one hand, there's truth to it. And on the other hand, it hits to this instability thing, which I just hits me the wrong way, right? If that's your
okay.
goal to be indispensable. So this is what people say. Nobody can do it as well as you can. Or if they can do it 80% is good, is that good enough? On the one hand, I have a lot of clients who are attorneys, right? And they've been doing whatever their area of expertise is for a number of years, right? So typically, the people who work for them don't have as much experience as they do, right? So, on the one hand, there is the part where it is to some extent true, right? Nobody could do it as well as them in the sense of they just don't have as much experience, right? On the other hand, it hits me a bit egotistical and a bit walking around thinking that nobody can do it as well as you, I think is not actually really all that helpful. Yeah.
It's not. The moment you believe your own press is the moment you're going down.
Right.
I've always believed that. If you're walking around like you're doesn't stink, one, you're probably not attracting the right kind of flies, and the kind of people around you that you really want to have there are not drawn to that energy. They're just not. And not to be like hippie about it, but that energy matters and it draws to it certain things, certain people. Am I looking for yes men? No, I'm not. In fact, I really believe in Jobs' quote, I hire smart people to tell me what to do, not for me to tell them what to do. That's the reality. Why are we shooting so low? Why are you expecting that you, of all people, no offense to you, me, or anyone else listening, why do we assume we would know more? I want to be in rooms with people who know more. That's the point.
Right. And I think there is that. And then I think the other thing is that if that is not the case in your company, then I think either, Stefan, you're right, you're not hiring the right people, or, oh my God, you expect everybody to get trained and be experts by osmosis, being in your haloed
Oh, yeah.
ground, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that maybe that's what it is. Oh my God, I'm processing as we're talking.
No, I'm processing too. I have something in a second. Yeah.
So the thing is that you've created the problem because you're not training somebody, because you're not taking the time to give them the information they need to be the expert. You're just expecting them to somehow be the expert and then judging
So
them when they're not.
So this is the thing that I've been saying recently, and it's so funny that we're circling back to the same point because it is like, when you keep seeing the red car, this is the red car for me, okay? I'm 47. I may look older with my gray and white beard, but I'm 47. There comes a time in your career. I don't know. Maybe I've had enough of these pop culture references that go over the heads of other people I'm working with that make me realize how old I really am. I'm an old dad, so I have nothing to measure against in that respect in where I am in my life. But I will say in my career, I've forgotten, and this is going to sound so ego, so take this for what it's worth. In my 20 plus year career, I have forgotten more marketing and leadership than other people I'm speaking to have learned. That's not a that's not a ego. That's just the reality. Now, here's the funny part. I've said this on a few podcasts, I'll say it here. There was a time before we had one of these. I'm holding a phone for anyone listening, iPhone in my hand. Before that time, not everything was documented via video or image, right? We didn't have. I had a college experience, luckily, that had very few digital photos. But that also means that we are probably the last generation. I hate to say this is going to sound pseudo dystopian. Please don't take it as such. It's just the reality as we see it with the idea of these pendants and other things that are going to be recording, right? Even now, as I speak, this podcast will be transcribed and can be used in a million different ways, which means that if we come to a place in a society where my daughter, the 5-year-old today, is now in her teens and every single thing she's had experience has been recorded, audio recorded, turned into transcription, she doesn't need to use memory the same way as Kim and I do. Kim and I need to think, if I ask him, hey, what happened to you in Q of 2017? Now, in my case, that might be, yeah, we renewed Uber and that was a tough renewal and I learned this and this from it, but I've never documented that. That's not in some knowledge graph or like a state of data that an AI could learn off of. That only exists in my experience in my head. In the future, my daughter can say, hey, what happened to me in 2029 that built fortitude? And all of a sudden, bloop, all these little dots that she might not have connected can connect for her, right? So, this concept now of we're the last generation of this wisdom that is trapped in your mind and was never actually recorded is a thing. And I'm like very much a proponent of you could be the lawyer saying you should figure it out, but the reality is you never wrote it down. So, how would anyone know about it? AI can't confirm it, which I'm not telling you to go train AI to be you. They will not be you. But you've had so much human experience and so much amazing learning left and right that it's a bit of an embarrassment of riches also that we have all of these experiences we've never put to paper, never put to digital, never done this. And that's the value we bring to the table, and we're not even using it.
Right. Right. I think the other, just so you're being very philosophical and I'm just going to be judgy. So I think the other thing is too, is that not only do we tend to blame our employees for underperformance when they haven't really been trained to do things our way, right? I think the other thing that happens is that we also set our employees up when we delegate things to them. So I had a client a couple of years ago who said to me, Kim, the question was just, how are you? Right. And the answer was, oh my God, I'm so tired. My associate was supposed to write a brief that was due in court today, and they did a terrible job on it. And I had to stay up until 3 in the morning to finish it so that it get filed on time. Right. And then the whole rest of the conversation is, can you believe the underperformance of this associate? And I'm like, who was underperforming there? That's a you problem. You created that problem. The employee didn't create the problem, right? You did not set that person up for success if they're at deadline and it's the first time you're looking at it and it's not up to snuff, right?
Mm,
And so I think the theme actually is running through this whole conversation because we talked about what is your experience of things, right?
sure.
And I think the other thing that sort of plays into this whole story is when that person cuts you off on the freeway, like you talked about before, right? When things happen to you, we can even bring it back into the workplace, right?
Yeah.
You brought up the like when somebody triggers you, you have a response to that, right? And my thing is, well, you've got to have tools in your toolkit. But
Yes.
here, and you do, right? Here, though, I think the work to do there is that we make an assumption that's where the work starts. Somebody does something, I get triggered, right? And now I have to have more appropriate responses to that, right? I think where I would go with that, it's that's a yes. And what the and is, that's actually not the best place to start. The best place to start is if the person cut you off on the freeway and it was really just about them, right? And you got super triggered and you're swearing at them, and you can trust me, there is no judgment here to anybody because I am the worst person on that. This is not something I have mastered. Okay, just drive in front of me slow in the fast lane. Okay, but that aside, the thing I think that is the work to do in addition is when you have a big response to something that is that was a small slight, a small whatever, or maybe it's even a big one, right? The question is, what story are you telling yourself about what that means? And
Yeah.
so I
Have you
think
learned from why you reacted the way you did?
that's right,
Right?
you
I
know,
learned from
because
the way
that
you
means
reacted the way you
something to
did.
you that is far beyond
Well, yeah, it's
like,
not that person cut you off. Absolutely not. It can't be that. A response that big, an amalgamate. People don't get out of cars and punch each other in the face because of the things they end up doing.
that's
Right?
right.
It's an amalgamation of things that got them to that point where
That's right.
that just happens to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to
Yeah.
speak. I would hope society hasn't broken down to that point yet. I say
Oh,
that.
I think,
Yeah,
America,
no,
I think we're not far.
we're not far at all. But I
Yeah.
would, again, I can still have hope. That's not where most of us are at with things. But yeah, again, I also think bringing that back, there's a very good chance that that is just the fatigue buildup that we have in the decisions we need to make. The daily decisions that seem like nothing. I think they say you make 50,000 decisions a day.
Yeah.
50,000. Literally, am I going to look this way or that way? That's a decision. Every single thing, if you count them up in a day, there's about 50,000 decisions you make. Whether they're conscious or subconscious, they're still decisions. So the question is, and this is why Jobs would wear a black turtleneck so he didn't have to choose clothing. You've heard of these things, guys. It's not
Yeah.
new, but it has gotten worse. It has gotten worse. It
Absolutely.
has. It has.
Yeah.
The amount of inputs versus the amount of the signal to noise ratio is crazy. And it is hard
Absolutely.
to understand whether or not your responses are because of an overload of the amount of noise you've been trying to filter. By 4 p.m., it's no wonder, Kim, that you are trying to find the head data space to be able to handle certain things because by then you've made so many decisions consciously and subconsciously and have had so many signal to noise ratio being off, right? Everything from a Slack here and emails there and text messages here. Just think about the number of inputs we've allowed ourselves. Every social media has a messaging portion of it. Why? Because it has to, because someone has to be able to reach you through it. Great. Pinterest. I think Pinterest has one. I'm like, whoa, who's going to reach out to me on Pinterest? It's too much. It's too much. And I don't know how we have to claim uncle at some point. People claim email bankruptcy. There's some aspect of digital detox that I think will be required. And I really believe the shift towards AI that we haven't seen yet, because it hasn't done what it's supposed to do yet, we're not supposed to see some chatbot back and forth nonsense. That's the very deep version of this technology. I think we are going to see a surgence of not agents that go do these log into your website weird thing, you build these things. That's all for the geeks like me. For the average person, it's going to be something that takes things off your plate, that gets predictive, that knows what you want, provides it to you before you even have to think about it. The predictiveness of me getting in my car and knowing that it's what are we, Wednesday, and that it's really nice outside and it's after hours for work, because here it'll be 5. Spotify knows that I like to listen to a certain type of music at that time, and it knows to play it then. And you know what? When I get cut off, I'm less likely to be angry.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny that you say that because so I do Zumba every Wednesday, like at particular
Sure.
times, right? Sunday morning. My my phone will say, "Are you driving to the gym?" And it will prompt me to, because I always like to do, I drive into San Francisco, so I always like to have my GPS on, even though not for directions, but for traffic, right? And
Tops.
then the second thing is that when I arrive at the gym, my little dance icon will pop up, and it's okay, are you at dance, do you want to track your fitness? And it's pretty creepy. It's cool and creepy.
For us now, only because we lived a life of privacy and all this stuff. Like, we've had that pre everything is recorded, right? But I used to think the guys at Bridgewater, if you don't know, Bridgewater was recording all conversations within their business, the hedge fund, for 20 years. And I was like, whoa, so creepy. Who would ever work there? Now we willingly get on calls with one another and say, oh, should I kick my AI agent out, my note taker, my this, my that? Every single thing is recorded. And somehow, over time, us older dogs will get over it. And the younger ones will accept that this is the way it is and never know
Yeah.
a world of privacy
Yeah.
and all that stuff. It's just not
Listen,
not
I was with my niece who has a 10-month-old daughter, and I can't tell you how many times she told the relatives, please don't give her your phone. 10 months old,
I know,
right?
I know, I know, I know,
Yeah.
I know, I know. Listen, my daughter's 6. Her grandfather from Montreal was down here this weekend for her birthday party. Literally, he had his iPad out and he's like, how is she watching this stuff? It's all in French. Now, my daughter's really smart. She reads since she was like 3 and she's hyper literate and all this interesting stuff, but she doesn't know French. She can understand it a little bit. She definitely can't read it. She knew where the buttons were. YouTube in any language is YouTube, right? She's so accustomed, I hate to say it, to the UI, UX, UI that she can do it. It's intuitive to her.
Yeah.
It's not intuitive because we haven't been giving her a phone as a pacifier, but the reality is she gets access to technology. Whether it's at school, at home, she gets access to technology. I just gave her a pseudo smartwatch. Again, nothing crazy, very controlled, very fun. I can take a video. But she knows how to do that. She didn't have to understand what the icon was for this or what that is
Yeah.
or how that works. It's all built in. It's having its effect. But it's funny, I heard this story, Kim, about evolution. Humanity is not evolving as fast. If you think about it, in the last 100 years, right? We were in horses and buggies 100 years ago, a little earlier than 100 years ago. The actual physiology of humanity is not evolving as fast as it would need to deal with all the inputs that are coming in. So it's normal to feel this way. It's normal. It's actually literally human nature, fight or flight. Same concept. We don't know the difference between looking at a phone and knowing what's out your window. Technically, your body does not know the difference. So if it sees a dinosaur or a shark, it reacts to some degree, and the chemical nature reacts. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get all whatever, but it is having that physiological effect on your body because we have not evolved to a place to understand that is not a window, that's not outside, that's not real, that's not in front of me. So it's all moving so quick. I don't blame us for reacting the way we are.
Well, Stefan, we have had a fascinating discussion and we have gone totally off the rails. All right, which is totally fine. Let me ask you, I think, one last question because I do think it will tie sort of these thoughts up. So,
Mhm.
what is one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your last company, grow this company relative to all the things that we've been talking about?
Talk the prospect out of it. I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah,
And it's
say
even
more.
crazier when you don't have the parachute or the safety net of the VC money and the will you make payroll and all that other good stuff, right? All the stuff you love so much about business that you jumped into the pond because it was so warm, only to find out it might be a frying pan. But I think I have found that most people don't actually know what they want 9 times out of 10. They think they know what they want, but they don't really know what they want. And they've been told that the box, the name, the convention, the service, the thing is supposed to be what they want. But for it to truly align with their expectations, you have to first understand what they're actually solving for. And that has become a mantra that I don't believe in trying to talk someone into the wrong thing. It doesn't serve. It doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve me. It's something that the idea that money will make its way between accounts is not what will give me dopamine. The idea that money will go between accounts and enrich both sides by virtue of what's given, that gives me dopamine. And that's where I think the main thing is. Actually, it's funny. I'm wearing this shirt and I didn't even think I would show it, but I will. And it says, if you're not helping people, you're just selling stuff. I didn't get into the business of just selling stuff. I could have done that. I could have been a salesperson. God knows I've managed them before, but I don't know. There's something about the idea that if you're truly consultative, some things just don't fit. And you should be really upfront about it. Because I'll tell you, the people I've turned down have come back with other people in the future and said, you know what? This is somebody I can trust. Either way, we'll get your business or we'll get your trust, but one of the two things are going to happen. And so that's the way I look at it, is if you approach it with true and genuine desire to help, it will come across. Even if you're as chatty as I am, and as blah, blah, blah verbal, or as analogetic, I don't know, filled with analogies. Hopefully that's the only thing you guys think I'm filled with. But that is something I think makes all the difference. And I think if more people started thinking that way, they'd be more helpful in business. Frankly, more people would get more satisfaction, and I think we'd be in a better place in general.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. I agree 100%. Is that I think if you walk in and think that you have to sell someone, right? You're already approaching it the wrong way. And I would say, especially as a coach, not everybody is the right, not only are you not the right coach for everybody, but not everybody is the right client for you, right? And
Yep.
you know what's funny is that so I've been in business for about 16 years, and I had a client early on who I like to call her the gift that keeps on giving.
No,
We all have that client, right? The one where you knew it wasn't the right fit, but it was early in my
you needed it. You
business.
needed it. It was a need. It was a need.
That's
It
right.
wasn't even a want. It was a
That's right.
need. How do we
It was
keep the lights on? We need the money, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
So hard.
Took the
And they
client
hurt
and
the most. They hurt the most.
oh my God. Oh my God. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, did you have other folks at that time working with you or no?
No, it was
Okay,
just
because by the way, that's the hidden cost of the people don't talk about. When you take on the wrong size, wrong fit client, you may not even be the person who manages that relationship,
yeah,
but that wears down on your company, on the
that's right.
people of your company. They start to feel like, hey, what is this? This isn't exactly what we said we were doing. How come all of a sudden we're thrashing, we're providing this and that? It doesn't feel right. What is this all about? We say we want this, but we're doing that. Again, you trade off a lot of stuff and you do it for an amount of money, which isn't to say you sell your soul, but it's only to say you start wondering whether or not those dollars cost you a lot more than you got.
Exactly. And I think what it really hurts when you have people working for you, it erodes trust. Because if you say that we value certain things, but then you
And
take,
instead, yeah, worst,
that's
worst.
right. You can,
And you
and
can't
then
build trust is a slow. So I heard this once, I think trust is built over decades and lost in minutes.
there you go. That's right. And there's nothing that you're going to say that's going to change that. It's got to be in your actions,
Yeah.
right? And I think although I don't know, I suppose this could be a whole nother podcast, but I do think that there is this idea of saying one thing and doing
Doing
another
another.
thing.
Absolutely.
And I think here's where the problem comes in. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I don't know if I've come to any conclusions yet, but I think generally when you lead a team or a company and you are generally liked and you're thought of as a good person, right? And then you make these decisions which really adversely affect people, right? I think there's an incongruence there that really creates this lack of trust that is very unstable, right? You show up as a mean person and people expect you to be mean. And then when you do douchey things, it's kind of in line. But
Yeah.
I think where the real danger is when you go against your own values and don't really own it, right? Then you create this tension between what you say and what you do and how it affects everybody. And
Yeah.
people are waiting for the other shoe to
Oh, the
drop.
shoe to drop. Absolutely. We do this in society. We do this with the pop culture, right? It's you look nice, honey. And then it's like, but nice was not the word. And what did you mean by nice? And I think you've hit on something huge, and you're right. It could be a whole other episode. So we'll leave it. But there is the concept to give someone something useful from this conversation, aside from us just talking about it. I would say have a gut checker in your business, because I don't think everyone who does that, myself very much included, does it intentionally. I want to think the things you're saying are your North Star, but sometimes your actions don't match that. And sometimes you're blind to that
Right.
because you're looking fast, or you're moving quick, or you're interpreting in a different way, right? And you walk
Right.
away from a conversation thinking something and thinking that one thing went across, and it ends up being something else. And you don't have someone there to gut check you, which, in all fairness, I try to build the kinds of environments where people can gut check each other. Fierce Conversations is a great book to read if you haven't read it. But like this idea of like, we're not here to judge one another, but we're here to provide feedback. And if it's incongruent, then I need to know, because I will not have my eyes everywhere or understand how everyone perceived something. So that's not to say we don't have any form of pecking order ever, or that anything. Yes, we do. But the reality is, if you try to keep things open so that you can see these things, you're going to be aware of a lot of things before they become a problem. Because the
Right.
person who walks away from that experience feeling a certain way, who doesn't share that little nugget harbors ill will. And then that thing is like a negative magnet that draws more negativity to it, because people look for things, just like that red car, to they look for things that match their belief system. So if they
Right.
now believe Stefan doesn't tell the truth, they're going to even subconsciously look for situations where I haven't told the truth. They're going to try and find them. Even if they're not looking for them, they're going to be on the lookout for it, because their mind told them this is a thing. So if you don't nip that in the bud right away, or at least be aware of them so that you can have a conversation and say, hey, listen, this is what I meant when I did this. Here's why I felt empowered. Here's why we had to take that client. I agree with you. This is not a client I would ever take under any other situation. But conversely, if we don't do this, here are the things that could happen to the business. Now, that's a lot of transparency, and you have to be okay with providing that feedback to other people on your team. But if you do have that kind of radical transparency and that kind of willingness, man, do they get to take ownership over that decision as well. They may not have been the one who made the decision, but they're now owners of the reason why. And that
Right.
changes the dynamic of, I made a decision, I did a thing, and you're going to deal with the repercussions of it, even though it doesn't map to what your expectations were of what we would do.
Right.
That is a key, like, connection point that I think we often miss. We don't have a gut checker. We don't have someone making sure, or we have this one gut checker and they're not in the room, or they're not here, or they're unaware, or they weren't in that one-on-one. And it's like, the more you can build that into your culture, and I'm not trying to be utopian about it, but the more you can build that into your culture, the healthier your culture is. Hard, but it's healthy.
Absolutely. And I think a good ending note, I would say, is that communication skills can be learned.
Yes.
And I think you don't have to be a naturally good communicator to be an effective leader. Because just in the same way as your company does SEO, it's systematic, right? We have all kinds of systems and processes. I think people don't understand that communication skills can also be learned in the same way. And systems and processes can be put in place in order to understand human communication. And so every style, every person who sees themselves or finds themselves leading can be a good leader, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great note for us to end on, is this sort of thought of, you don't have to know it, you just have to be open to learning it.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
all right, Stefan, this has been such a fun conversation.
Same. I've loved every minute. It's been
Yeah,
great.
thank you so much. You have been listening to Unconventional Wisdom About Conventional Wisdom. I'm your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. You've been listening to Stephan Bajaio.
Bajaio.
Yeah. So Stefan's info will be in the show notes. They do SEO and being able to be found by AI. So I guess the new term is AEO. What's the difference between AEO and GEO?
It's all nonsensical, and I'll tell you this. Think of it as we help companies unlock the thought leadership and the empathy that they need to be putting into their content so that it doesn't get lost with all the AI slop and all the nonsense coming out right now. That's
Right.
where we focus. We help people, enable them to use that info and learn what their customers actually are asking and needing and the problems they want, how they express themselves, and making sure they actually meet that moment where and when it happens. So that's more of what we do than the simple SEO stuff. But we're evolving
Yeah,
because the whole system is evolving, and every business needs to evolve. And Kim and I are evolving, right?
there you go.
We're accepting being recorded.
There you go. All right. And for me, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. Comes out once a week. It's got one thing in it, listener, one thing, and also some agency around being able to implement something, which I always think is a good thing. Thank you so much for listening, and go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire.